This gentleman is kind enough to come on the Megapod once a year. We have him quarterly in the NFL season on the numbers game, and I was just telling him off air, I was like, why was I so convinced the NFL regular season was over? And I jumped the gun by a week, but as he points out, it gives us a chance to talk awards, which we will do. He is the creator of DVOA, his proprietary stat that breaks down NFL games on a play-by-play granular basis. He's done it all the way back to 1981 to present day. He works at FTN Sports now, and he's also the founder of Football Outsiders. We do want to point that out. It's the great pioneer of football analytics, Aaron Schatz. How you doing, Aaron?
Hey, I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm having a happy New Year so far.
Good. So far. What are we, two and a half days in? So far, so good.
You got to look on the bright side, man.
Yeah,
it's been a good 2.5 days, yeah.
I remember my mom used to say to me, like, this was, by the way, it was not on the regular New Year, but on Rosh Hashanah, she used to say to me, Gilly, you can't be rude to me. You'll be rude for the rest of the year. She had those, like, superstitions about that kind of stuff. So good. I hope it's a portent of the rest of your year to come. Before we get to awards, and we have some process questions on awards, too. Let's talk DVOA, and let us talk about putting the Ravens and the Niners, the respective number one seeds in the AFC and the NFC, in the postseason, into historical DVOA perspective. What you got for us?
Yeah, they're awesome, basically. My numbers have very rarely seen teams as good as the Ravens and the 49ers. And the reason why, by the way, is that the Ravens and the 49ers have demolished the good teams on their schedule. They didn't just beat them. They beat them by a lot. And the Ravens have been amazing this year while playing the 5th hardest schedule in the league this year. The 49ers schedule has been average, but the Ravens schedule has been very hard. So the Ravens come out as the 3rd best team ever measured by DVOA through 16 games. And the 49ers come out as the 6th best team through 16 games. Obviously, through 16 games means the regular season for every other team except for the last couple of years. And ironically, the one team from the last couple of years that would be on this table is the Bills from the DeMar Hamlin game. So they only played 16 games too that year. But there's one more game for these teams. They're going to sit starters. Their ratings are probably going to drop. But through the end of when they're playing their starters, these are 2 of the top 10 teams that have been around in the last 40 years.
This is amazing because we're in the moment. So our brains don't necessarily go to this historical perspective on it, but at least through DVOA, 2007 Patriots, 1991 Skins. We've talked about that many times before. Those are your 2 best teams. And then the 85 Bears are in that group in the top 6 as well. So we're talking about that kind of company here. When you step back, you're the guy who came up with this metric. Does it pass the Aaron Schatz, I'm a fan viewpoint? Like when you look at it, are you like, yeah, I think that's kind of true. They probably are that good.
It absolutely tracks. Listen, the losses that the Ravens and the 49ers have had, except for the 49ers losing to the Ravens, have been very close losses. So the fact that they've lost 3 games or 4 games instead of 1 or 2, the fact is their wins have been fantastic. The Ravens demolished San Francisco. That's team number 2. Miami, that's team number 4. Detroit, that's team number 7. They whipped Cleveland the first time those 2 teams played. That's team number 8. Okay, they beat Seattle, destroyed Seattle. That's team number 13. Other than the close loss to the Browns in the second game, the Ravens have just destroyed the good teams on their schedule. Now, it doesn't feel as like the 85 Bears, but there's 2 reasons for that. The first is that the 85 Bears were a pop culture phenomenon in a way that the Ravens are not. There's no Super Bowl shuffle. The other is that when we think of the 85 Bears, we think of the playoffs and how good they were in the playoffs. And I'm not including the playoffs. These are regular season numbers only because we don't know yet what the Ravens will do in the playoffs.
Yeah, and they were a cultural phenomenon, and they were also, like, our mind's eye has a highlight reel of them in a day when the NFL allowed for vicious hits also, right? We don't get that element as well into into our mind. All right, some other interesting little quirks. The Rams, they're either going to be the 6th or the 7th seed in the NFC, depending on how the games shuffle out this weekend. They have an interesting unit ranking. Would you care to share with us?
Yes, DVOA is not as high on the Rams as most people are. They're 7th in offense, and they're like 2nd over the last 7 weeks. But their special teams are the 6th worst I've ever measured. And what's remarkable about that is that special teams are super tight this year, in part because every time they make the kickoff rules different, it makes kickoffs less important. So you can be less positive or less negative because kickoffs just don't mean anything anymore. The Rams are nearly 3 times as bad as any other special teams unit this year. And they just got rid of their kicker and brought in Brett Maher as their new kicker. But their punt coverage has been horrific this year. They've allowed 2 touchdowns and a bunch of other long returns. And they're below average in everything else. But what it really is field goals and punts. That's what's terrible this year.
Is your takeaway from that, well, special teams, I guess, doesn't matter all that much in the wash? Or is it...
No, it nearly cost them the game against the Giants. It nearly cost them the game.
Yeah.
It cost them the game against the Ravens, right? They let the punt return in touchdown in overtime, and the Ravens beat them. So, no, special teams is less important than offense and defense, but this is going to come back to bite them in the playoffs.
That was exactly the second part of after the or was going to be, or is it going to come back to bite them? And there you go. Here's our answer. All right. Real quick, we have a strange scheduling thing. When you track schedule strength as well, we have a team that played one of the most historically hard ones and a team that played a historically easy one.
Yes. Cincinnati, and this is including their final game this week against Cleveland, right? Obviously, ratings will change a little bit in the last week, but as of now, they have played the 5th hardest schedule since 1981.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens. The AFC North is really good. The Ravens are super good. And, of course, they play the NFC West. That means they played San Francisco.
And they had a Joe Burrow injury, so it was just a...
And they had to play Kansas City.
Yeah.
Right? So Cincinnati has played a remarkably hard schedule. And then New Orleans, who we all knew had an easy schedule going into the season.
Right.
Has played one of the dozen easiest schedules. But their schedule, it is not as easy as the Bengals' schedule is hard.
Oh, interesting. And yet are still fighting to make the postseason. Okay, and then moving forward, projecting into next year, you have DVOA, and then you have weighted DVOA. And weighted DVOA, correct me if I'm wrong, is more of a more recent metric, so it weeks slough off as you continue. What's the team that leaps off the page in weighted DVOA that we should know maybe as we head into next year?
Well, it's interesting because you would think that weighted DVOA is more predictive for next year, but it's not, which is interesting. But I will say the team that has gotten hot at the end of the year is the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears are now, this is wild, 7th in weighted DVOA.
Wow.
They're 16th in offense. So their offense has gotten a little bit better. They're 5th in defense. The turnaround of the Bears defense in the second half of the season has been really remarkable. And Jaquan Johnson, I think is his name, is the cornerback, is very likely an all-pro. But also, they have Montez Sweat now for their pass rush. But otherwise, it's a bunch of guys, nobody really knows their names. And the Bears defense is playing phenomenally well, which, makes the Justin Fields decision interesting. But let's assume they are gonna trade Fields. They're going to have this really good-looking defense with the top rookie quarterback, and then all the money they save on quarterback, they'll be able to go out and get more defensive players. So, I mean, the Bears are really interesting for next year.
Yeah, and you've anticipated the next question, which was, what do they do if it's primarily defense? What do they do with Justin Fields? Because again, as a Washington guy, I'd love to have Justin Fields, but your gut tells you they're not going to do that they're going to let him go.
Justin Fields, the splash plays are more impressive than the overall performance. As a passer, he's still below replacement level. As the total passing experience, not including scrambles, not including designed rushing. So as good as Fields seems to be, for him to develop into something real after 3 years below replacement level, that's a really rare thing.
Yeah.
So I think they've got to move on from him, especially because in 2 years he'll become expensive, whereas a rookie quarterback will be cheap for 5.
I think if I'm the Bears, I probably do go to rookie, and the asking price will determine how much another team wants him, that's for sure. We'll come back. Awards talk with Aaron next. Gil Alexander, Kelly Bidlin, Aaron Schatz, the creator of DVOA at FTN Sports these days. By the way, Aaron, tell everybody what they can get at FTN, where they should go.
Sure, you go to ftnfantasy.com and specifically ftnfantasy.com/DVOA for all of my content and stuff about DVOA. And with a Stats Plus subscription, you'll get all of the DVOA splits by down, by zone, historical numbers back to 1981 and all kinds of good stuff.
I love it. And as he moves forward, he'll try to get to 1980, 1979, so on and so forth. If he can get
We're hoping to do 1979 and 1980 this offseason. Yep.
Love it. Love it. Okay, before we get to awards, because we were talking about this through the break also, top of the draft, and I think you're right. I think Chicago, because I was a proponent of the Rams moving on from Goff and restarting at quarterback. They did the opposite. But I believe like the economic system of the NFL is cruel because you got to make these 9-figure decisions on guys like Cousins and Dak, guys that you don't know if they're going to be Hall of Famers. And you can't now exploit their rookie contract and pay other players. So it's this cruel system in the NFL. But with the Cardinals, you're saying it's different than the Bears because Kyler's already on a deal.
Yeah, all indications are that the Cardinals will keep Kyler Murray as their quarterback. And I think part of it is because if they trade him, all that bonus and stuff all accelerates onto their cap. With Fields in Chicago, the issue is his second contract.
Right.
They don't want to give him the second contract. With Murray, they've already done it. So if they trade him, they have to take a big cap hit that Chicago doesn't have to take if they trade Field. So all indications are the Cardinals will keep Murray, which means the top 4, if the top 4 is what we think it will be, you'll end up with Chicago, Washington, and New England taking quarterbacks because Jaden Daniels is now considered a pretty clear number 3, and Arizona taking Marvin Harrison.
Okay. We got a few months to stew on that. It's going to be fascinating.
And I mentioned to you, the film people like Drake May a lot, like more than other North Carolina quarterbacks. In fact, I like the idea of a bet on Drake May to be the number 1 pick. I think the odds are something like plus 400 or something.
Wow.
The idea that he might pass Caleb Williams and be the number 1 pick, I think that's a good bet.
That was Aaron's response into me off air going, oh, no, I don't want them to draft Drake May. We have Sam Howell. What's the difference there? And he's like, oh, no, the film people love Drake May. So
plus 425 over at DraftKings.
Plus 425 to be the number 1 pick. Okay, awards. You are one of the 50 AP voters for all NFL awards. Now, to the extent you can, because I know now we're getting close and you might want to be a little more coy than you were before, but let's go through these one by one. MVP, your thoughts?
The Lamar Jackson thing is really complicated because statistically he's not one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks this year, but you have to give him some credit for what the Ravens offense has done otherwise because his gravity opens things up for the running game. So it's interesting. I haven't decided yet whether I'm voting for Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, or Dak Prescott. It probably depends on what happens in the final week of the season.
Josh Allen 35-1, Dak Prescott 18-1, Lamar Jackson minus 20,000.
Yep.
Okay. Let us move on to offensive rookie of the year. There is
another hard one.
This is hard, right? C.J. Stroud or a guy who's 4 catches and 30 yards away from breaking both the rookie receiving receptions and receiving yards records. Puka Nacua.
I always say it's a little surprising that Nacua only comes out with something like the 9th or 10th best rookie season by DYAR, which is my stat for total value. So I have to look into a little bit more why he doesn't come out higher in that stat, whereas Stroud comes out as something like the 6th or 7th best rookie quarterback of the last 40 years.
By the way, didn't you have a little quirk? Didn't you have like Jonathan Mingo as the worst rookie wideout ever?
Yep, Jonathan Mingo comes out with the worst DYAR of any rookie wideout ever, but that doesn't mean he necessarily is going to have a bad career because Plaxico Burress is on that list too, and so is Quinn Early, and they had very good careers.
Okay, defensive rookie of the year, which if you were staring at the betting markets, I like to say it all the time, we who bet are very much way too close to the sun on a lot of things. Jalen Carter was this massive favorite. And Jalen Carter, doesn't even take a big percentage of snaps on the Eagles defense. That is now changing. Where do you stand on defensive rookie of the year?
Yeah, I'm totally forgetting the name of the kid from the Rams.
Kobe Turner.
Tackle.
Kobe Turner.
Yeah, but he all of a sudden showed up on the gambling boards like yesterday. The fact is there is now some talk about him, but my guess is it's still going to Jalen Carter. It's tough because Jalen Carter is not a guy who gets stats, but for example, the PFF grading loves him this year. You also have to consider Devin Witherspoon, I think, and Will Anderson.
Devin Witherspoon's been fantastic, and Will Anderson is a favorite. By the way, I may have the guy later on the show that is responsible for the Kobe Turner appearance, Jason Weingart, coming up. All right, and by the way, I'll just throw this in. So offensive player of the year then by default becomes McCaffrey?
Or Hill.
Oh, you still might consider Hill. Okay.
I'm still considering Hill. McCaffrey and Hill with Lamb or A.J. Brown or Brandon Ayuk, number 3.
Okay. Brandon Ayuk on that list. Coach of the year, where Kevin Stefanski now is a huge favorite.
There are so many really good candidates for this award. I can't really talk about where I'm going.
Okay, because when you were on, I just want to remind folks, when you were on 4 weeks ago, you were like, I'm all about Dan Campbell because and I remember your thinking was best combo of old school and newfangled analytics. I'll paraphrase.
Stefanski is a good combination of those two things as well. But I think that a lot of what is going on in Cleveland this year is not Stefanski, it's Jim Schwartz.
Okay. That was the most coy of his answers. Okay, that's interesting. Can I translate that to that's the most confusing one for you, in terms of who to go with?
Probably, but there's a lot of confusing ones.
Okay. Here's the one that is in some ways confusing because there's no criteria, but in other ways, I thought you made a great point last time where you're like, well, look, Damar Hamlin's either your number 1 or he's not on your ballot, which is comeback player of the year. You were pretty clear where you stood with this one, I thought, that it wouldn't be Damar for you.
It's really hard. How do I say this nicely? I don't want to look like a jerk.
Okay, yes, you really do have to preface.
What Damar Hamlin has done is amazing. What Damar Hamlin has done to get back to practicing and playing even just a couple of snaps is fantastic. But are you going for the best comeback or are you going for the best player? Because if you're going for the best comeback, it's Damar Hamlin. If you're going for the best player who came back in some way, it's actually like Tua Tagovailoa or Brock Purdy or Lamar Jackson, all of whom had injuries at the end of last year.
I'm writing down Aaron Schatz, horrible human being. Let me get that off of my notes right.
I honestly don't want to. I'm going to make my votes known, and I don't want it to be like, oh, you're the only person who didn't vote for Damar Hamlin. I'll admit that there's pressure there.
I hope we're going to get the news story the next day. 49 people voted for Hamlin. There was one person who went with an actual football. No, it's going to be interesting.
I will say I don't quite get the Flacco thing. I guess the Flacco thing is trying to balance the two. Because if you're doing the best comeback, it's Hamlin. And if you're doing the best player, it's Lamar.
But Flacco, you would think is the default, like the guy who is the comeback player.
He's sort of halfway in between, right? It's like a really interesting comeback, and he's been good, even if he hasn't been as good as Brock Purdy coming back from the torn ulnar ligament, or Tua coming back from the concussions, or Lamar Jackson coming back from whatever the injury was at the end of last year.
Defensive player of the year.
A pass rusher.
A pass rusher. Okay.
I don't know yet which one. One of these guys I'll vote for number 1. I don't know
Micah, Miles, TJ, you don't know.
No, I will say Micah Parsons does the best in Brandon Thorne's true sack rate and true pressure rate. Which Brandon Thorne measures not just how many pressures you get, but which offensive linemen do you get them against. And Micah Parsons is the best in that, which is interesting.
Okay, last thing, because we only have 30 seconds. We're going to throw out a wild scenario. Is there a possibility that a person with the most second-place votes in MVP, like Christian McCaffrey, will somehow weasel his way in because he has the most second-place votes and it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 system.
No, enough people. No, at this point, I can't imagine that it's not going to be at least 45 out of the 50 people voted for it.
Okay, there you go. I don't even have to ask the rest of the question. There you go. Aaron Schatz from FTN, the creator of not only Football Outsiders back in the day, but the inventor of DVOA. Aaron, thank you so much, man. It's always a pleasure, always fascinating, and good luck figuring out who you're going to vote for.
Sounds good. It's a tough year, man. It's a tough year.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.